Hi everyone, my name is Dimitri, and today we're going to be talking about The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. When this book came out in 2015, it won a lot of awards, it gained a lot of press coverage, and it won the MacArthur Genius Grant, or Maggie Nelson won the MacArthur Genius Grant after this. We'll be covering a few things in this video. I think this book is very interesting in its investigation of how words can both create and destroy, often at the same time. We'll be talking about that at the end of this video, but first I think we should understand who Maggie Nelson is and what is she trying to do. Why does she write? So looking at her own words, what does Maggie Nelson say? She says she believes philosophy matters most when it is felt in a person and related to your daily life. And so that's what she's trying to do in this book, in The Argonauts. She's trying to take philosophy, which might be up here for most people, and ground it and bring it down. And she's not going to dumb it down by doing that, but she's just going to make it more relatable and more personal, and maybe gain some good access points into these philosophical discussions. She describes her own book as auto-theory. Auto-theory means autobiographical and critical theory. So what is she doing in this book? She's combining her own life experience and stories with the last 30 years of feminist and queer theory. So she's trying to distill feminist and queer theory and express it through her own life. So how does this theory relate to who she is? And by doing that, you as the reader, maybe you'll be able to draw connections to your own life and bring that theory in. And in that way, I think this book is a great access point for people that are maybe not as well versed in feminist or queer theory. This book takes on a lot of different formats and genres. Maggie Nelson is known for her genre bending, and she definitely does this in here. And I think that's one of the main reasons she earned the MacArthur Fellowship. This book is not autofiction, but I have a hard time not comparing it to some of the autofiction books that I have read. Karl Ove Knausgaard's My Struggle book series that came out. While it might be hard for a lot of people to come up with connections between these two authors because they have a lot of things that in which they differ and beliefs in which they differ, they both try to make the everyday more beautiful. They try to bring the banal down. They try to make the banal, heighten the banal, bring the everyday up, and find the art in the everyday, in your everyday life. A lot of people criticize this book because they feel that it's all over the place, that it's hard to predict where it's going to go, and it's jumping from one point to a story to another point and then back. And where people criticize it, I think it actually finds it's one of its strengths. This book feels to me like a conversation on fire. It's very accessible, and it goes to all these different points. It feels very natural to me. And while it might be frustrating that she's jumping all over the place, or you might not understand why she's doing it, it seems purposeful. And you get the feeling of a natural conversation that will just tangent and then come back and then tangent. And I think she does that pretty darn well. This book is not a polemic, and by that I mean she's not trying to argue a point and push it past you. She's not trying to shove anything down your throat. She wants you just to have a conversation. This is a dialectical book. She's trying to have a conversation with you. She doesn't want to tell you what to believe. She wants to complicate barriers, boundaries, and words. She doesn't want to simplify them. She doesn't want you to just accept these binaries or these categories that maybe we as a culture accept. She doesn't want to ignore the gray areas or the taboo areas of life. She wants to explore them and explore them without shame. And she's not saying that this is maybe something that is right for everyone, but that we should be able to have these grown-up conversations. This book is brave, vulnerable, and strong all at once. like I said, it feels like a conversation, and that's also why it makes such a good access point into these into critical theory and semiotics and philosophy. She can talk about all these things. She does a really great job of making the reader feel smart, and while she's not dumbing down things, she makes them comprehensible by bringing it into the everyday. I think this is her true gift and mastery as an author. She's bringing the highbrow down to the daily life, and even in the format progresses this idea of having a conversation with Maggie Nelson. She makes sure that the format hosts a ton of room in the margins. She talks about in her life as a reader how she always writes in the margins, and there's an encouragement for you to do the same. And so you're invited as the reader to do that. She also has, if she's quoting someone, see if I can find that, the author's name in the margins. And so you can join a famous author's you can join on the equal level of a famous person into the conversation that Maggie Nelson is having with you. And I like that format, and I think it really works well with this book. Okay. The book culminates and moves towards this one point at the end where she talks about her pregnancy and giving birth. And pregnancy is this universal thing that just doesn't get talked about. She mentions that there's this matrophobia, this repressed knowledge that we're all born, but we don't really talk about the process as much, and it's not represented or discussed. And there's this taboo or shying away from talking about it. When this book was published, people asked her, why did you feel you had the right to tell your pregnancy story when there's so many other pregnancy stories out there? And she would often just respond saying, name one, name a pregnancy story. Not that they don't exist, but they are hard to find. It's hard to find a story written by a woman that depicts pregnancy. And so she wants to bring this into the conversation. She doesn't want us to shy away from it, especially maybe the uglier sides that often go ignored or are repressed in society. I want to talk about the power of words to create and destroy. And to do that, I think I should investigate two quotes that this book heavily leans on. The first one is quoted in the second paragraph. It's by Ludwig Wittgenstein. Sorry. And she's talking to her partner. And she says to her partner, "Before we met, I had spent a lifetime devoted to Wittgenstein's idea that the inexpressible is contained inexpressibly in the expressed." It's this paragraph, and now this is Maggie speaking again. It's this paragraph is quite literally why I write, or how I feel I am able to keep writing. She's saying words aren't the perfect vessel to communicate thoughts and feelings, but it's the only thing that we have. That words are a limited medium, but they can express an unlimited amount of ideas and emotions and feelings and events. And there's this beauty in that. And she feels free as an author because of that ability of words. The other quote I want to focus on comes from Roland Barthes. He's a philosopher and a semiotician. He's heavily quoted in this book. I think the format also is borrowed from Barthes. He had a very similar format that Maggie Nelson is using, where the margins are increased so that you can write into it, and that there's an author name if the author is being quoted in the text, giving that feeling of a discussion, of this dialectical discussion. This is the quote, and it's where the title Argonauts comes from. "How the subject who utters the phrase 'I love you' is like the Argonaut renewing his ship during its voyage without changing its name. Just as the Argo's parts may be replaced over time, but the boat is still called the Argo. Whenever the lover utters the phrase 'I love you,' its meaning must be renewed by each use. As the very task of love and of language is to give to one and the same phrase inflections which will be forever new. So what is this quote about? Love is one word that can express a multitude, or an infinite really, amount of feelings and emotions, right? And relationships. And every time you say I love you, its meaning changes. But we still call it love, right? Just like the Argo, this famous ship, even if we've replaced all of its parts, changed the planks, changed the sails, changed the crew members even, we still call it the Argo. Tying back to the limited scope of words, but also it's the best thing that we have, right? Language is limited, but it's the best thing that we have to express ourselves. Ultimately, this book is about breaking down these binary categories, but not completely destroying them. It's recognizing them for what they are. These categories and even words themselves are faulty containers. Maggie Nelson feels caught in between two worlds, or maybe multiple worlds. She's accused of being heteronormative by her queer friends, and she also discusses the other binary of being or feeling homonormative, and what does that really mean, right? And so she's exploring these concepts and these two poles, and she tries to break them down, that they are not maybe actually binary, that they are one or the other. This book is about how words can kill, but at the same time give shape to something. Words can contain, but they can also allow something to move. Language is, after all, a faulty ship, and it allows us to communicate the inexpressible. But, and I want to return maybe, there's another quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he says, words are the finite tools for an infinite mind, right? So language is a faulty ship. It can't fully express everything that we feel or experience, but they're the best ships we have. If any of that sounded interesting, I hope you guys pick up the Argonauts. It's a great read. Have a good day.